And we're all aware that we're still in this COVID stage. And to protect us, we are constantly being told, stay at home, wash your hands, keep a safe distance, and our friends in Victoria at the moment having to wear a mask. Well, because protection has been a word that's used a lot in the last few months, I thought I would share with you today David's prayer for protection, taken in Psalm 25. Where we take refuge or how we are protected is so important, both in the natural and in the spiritual. And the two major causes of David's distress was his enemies and his sin. Now, enemies can be anything that would defeat us, bring us down, keep us from our purpose, or prevent us from walking with God. Enemies can be people, or powers, or forces, or even attitudes. They are anything that would harm or oppose us, especially in our relationship with God. COVID has even been labelled as an enemy. And many, many people have been afraid, lonely, isolated, anxious, feeling loss. So what does David ask in his prayer about his enemies? His prayer for protection. Psalm 25 verses 19 and 20. He says, don't let my enemies triumph over me. Guard my soul, deliver me and protect me. We are so totally dependent on God, and he waits for us to ask for his help. God will fight for us, and God will protect us, and he won't allow us to be tempted beyond what we can endure or stand up to. He will rescue us. He will also fight on our behalf against the enemy. And as we heard in our call to worship, he is our refuge and strength. And don't forget, we have armour to put on each day to protect us from the darts of the evil one. The next thing he prays may seem rather strange. David prayed, may integrity and uprightness protect me. How would integrity and upright living protect us from our enemies? I always said to my kids, always tell the truth, always be honest. You've got nothing to fear. Integrity and uprightness protect me? Well, no matter what anyone does to us, we are responsible to conduct ourselves in an honest and honourable way. If we retaliate or act like our enemies, we're no better than them. David, as we know from Scripture, was not a perfect man. And in verse 7 of Psalm 25, he acknowledges that he was rebellious, like some of the people in COVID. Rebellious and did wrong, and his sin made him miserable. He doesn't rationalise or offer excuses, but he takes ownership of his sin. And so, you read in verse 11, he asks God to forgive his sin. He knows he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but he asks for it, because he knows God is a God of mercy and a God of love. And if you're to read verses 4 and 5, this shows he is completely dependent on God as he deals with the problem of his enemies and his sin. And David asks God to guide him and show him how to live. He says in verse 5, show me the path where I should walk. Point out the road for me to follow. So that's the first part. Pray that integrity and uprightness would protect him. But then the next part of his prayer is very significant too. It says, as I wait for you. He needed to wait on God and hope in God. Now, waiting isn't at the top of most people's list of things to do. We don't like to wait. That's been very obvious throughout COVID. People in queues without social distancing, panic buying, lying to get across the borders and avoiding isolation because they don't want to wait and spend 2 weeks in isolation. Waiting just does not seem or feel natural. It seems like a waste or lost effort. But in reality, waiting might be one of the strongest moves of faith that we ever make. For when we wait on God and seek his wisdom, he will protect us and guide us, and our trust in him increases. So if we want to be protected, we need to walk closely with God when life gets tough and wait for God. David admits he can't do this himself. He needs God to show him what to do and where to go and how to live. And any of us can ask God those same things that David prayed for, because God never intended us to live our life on our own. We were made to live with God and to work with God. So there's a third part now to his prayer. May integrity and uprightness protect me as I wait for you. And the last part says, because my hope is in you. God has a purpose and a plan for his people as individuals and communities. Believers should seek God's direction and counsel in discerning these plans and purposes in their lives. True godliness is not just obeying God's laws or ways, but daily applying them, daily living out God's ways in our life, waiting on him and having our hope in him. Jesus is the only hope for the world and the hope for us personally. Without him, we are defenseless and we leave ourselves open to attack. Jesus is the hope for the world. So I want us now to look briefly at several things that David did to position himself to receive God's protection, guidance, and forgiveness. And in verse 1,
to you, O Lord, I lift up my soul.
He focused on God and turned to God in prayer. Prayer should be our first resource to seek protection in our lives. But so often we seek help in other directions, in other people. If we need protection, we need to turn to God, to lift up our soul to him in prayer.
Don't fail me, Lord, for I am trusting you.
Here it is. David decided to trust God. God can be fully trusted to protect us and help us in times of need.
Show me the path where I should go, O Lord. Point out the right road for me to walk.
Yes, like David, we can be rebellious and arrogant and want to go our own way and do it my way. But the best protection is following God's way. Seek direction from God. If only we ask God's help more often in life and God's direction, we may not need quite so much protection. Verse 5.
Lead me, teach me, for you are the God who gives me salvation. I have no hope except in you.
Teach me. What a beautiful prayer to pray. Surely, if we want to be protected, we need to be learning more about God. Get the Bible out every day and read it for reassurance of his presence and for the many promises that are contained in his word. I have no hope except in you, David said. He put his hope in God and in what God would do. To put our hope in God means we trust him and we wait for him to come through. And it's not wishful thinking, wondering if God will come through, but we wait for it with joyful, confident expectation, knowing that God will keep his promise to protect us. And God will come through, even if we have to wait for a while. Waiting is good for us. Verse 15.
My eyes are ever looking to the Lord for help, for he alone can rescue me.
Where are you looking for protection? David, ever looking to the Lord for help. We need to keep focused on Jesus instead of focusing on our fears and our worries and all the trouble that seems to be around us. If we want to be protected, fix our eyes on God. And as that old chorus says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And more than that, he will protect us as we keep our eyes on him, because God is our rescuer and God is our refuge.
I come to you for shelter. Protect me, keep me safe, and don't disappoint me.
David took refuge in God. We all have our enemies of one kind or another, and there is only one safe place of refuge and protection, and that is God. If we don't choose to seek God's refuge, or we head to the wrong shelter, such as sin or some addiction, this compounds our problems and things seem to go worse. We read, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. Our Father's refuge is a safe haven. David prayed, protect me. And he knew where to find that protection. He prayed. He trusted God. He asked direction from God. His hope was in God. He looked to God. He took refuge in God and found that that was the safest way to live. I wonder how safe you feel today. Or are you afraid, anxious, fearful, or worried about something? If you are, maybe do what David did and reach out to God in prayer. Seek his direction and help and take refuge in him.